Awesome. And I'll go ahead and begin. So, hi, everybody. My name is Jackie Woodside. I assume you all know a little bit about me since you're here and have at least seen this, the information about tonight's program, Living in Quantum Consciousness. But I'm going to just take a moment to say a minute about myself before you listen to me for the next hour and a half or so. So for those of you who don't know me, I guess more than anything, I would say I am a teacher and an expert on consciousness and elevation of consciousness, vibration, your vibe. I've written books on it. I've been studying consciousness since way before it was a thing in mainstream culture. I've been studying different consciousness teachers and the notion of consciousness for about probably 25 years. Some of my teachers and mentors were Dr. David Hawkins. He's now passed, but I studied with him. Ken Wilber is another person, Bruce Lipton, people that I have studied with and just absolutely have changed my life. So my background, I was a clinical social worker and a psychotherapist in private practice for many years. I was in the mental health field for about 30 years. I also have been in the coaching field for 30 years. Now, I didn't do 30 years of psychotherapy and 30 years of coaching, because that would make me way older than I am. There was some overlap between the two fields, but I love, love, love this field of coaching. I'm an author. I've written several books, 4-time best-selling author on Amazon and a USA Today best-selling author. Thank you. With my most recent book, Younger Self Letters, which was a compilation book. Fundamentally what I teach people is about consciousness and how to raise consciousness. I've done a TEDx talk called Creating Conscious Communities. I'm an international speaker. I just got back from leading a meditation and mindfulness retreat in the Seychelles off the coast of East Africa for a group of Iranian CEOs, which was just a wonderful, wonderful experience. I've did a retreat in Mexico with National Geographic and have done gigs in Canada and spoken in other countries. So I guess, so those are some of my credentials. I have a master's degree in social work. I've been in mental health field. I've been in coaching. I do training and development work. But I guess the other thing that I'll say about my path and why I'm so committed and so passionate about this topic is that I guess you could say I've gone from like kind of hot mess in my life, kind of a hot mess, to happy and blessed. So, some of you who know me and have heard my story before, I just grew up with a lot of tragedy and trauma in my early life. My mom was widowed when I was 2 years old. I lost my father's brother and my father's father, so my grandfather, all within 9 months of one another. So my grandmother lost her husband and 2 sons all in 9 months time, if you can imagine what that was like. And I was just a young child when my family went through all of that. And it really was kind of my family legacy. That's kind of what the Woodsides were known for in upstate New York, which is a very small and rural community. So, I went on kind of living through that trauma. My mother, what she went through, I went on to just create a life that was a hot mess of addiction and depression and adult attention deficit disorder, post-traumatic stress disorder. So I was really, like, no kidding, a hot mess. And it was these principles that I teach and that I'll be teaching and talking about tonight that took my life from hot mess to happy and blessed. Today I'm happily married. I do work that I love all around the world and love my son. And I have 3 waterfront homes, 2 in upstate New York and 1 here in Massachusetts. I'm a water snob. I grew up on the St. Lawrence River and my whole life wanted to live on water. So, so the life I have today did not happen by accident. It absolutely happened with intention and by design. So that's a little bit about me. I do like to be just transparent and authentic, that I'm not just here talking the talk, but I absolutely have walked the walk as well. So tonight we're going to be doing some work in, in a program that I call Living in Quantum Consciousness. And what I mean by that, quantum consciousness, is we'll get into it a little bit more, but understanding that you are one with the greater consciousness that life is. So we're going to begin thinking tonight about what consciousness is. I'm going to give you some my definition of it. But for now, let's just think about that the universe itself is awake and alive and conscious. And so the notion of living in quantum consciousness really means being awake, aware, present, and responsible for your individual quantum. You are the smallest part, one notion of a bigger consciousness that life is. So that's how I use this phrase of living in quantum consciousness. There is the one consciousness of which we all are a part of it. So in that sense, in the sense of one unity, one consciousness, we all share that. We are all one in consciousness. And yet, like the ocean has buckets of water, or like the ocean has a drop in it, we're part of the whole consciousness, but we also have our own unique proposition, our own unique properties to it. So I want to begin tonight with a thought from a wonderful author, Dr. Eben Alexander, in his book, Living in a Mindful Universe. Some of you might know Dr. Eben Alexander.
Yes. Do I have ADHD? Yes, but it's still a limit.
Hold on, let me see how I can mute everybody. Mute all. Great, there you go. So if anyone does want to say or interject anything at all, just raise your electronic hand and I will see that. I'm trying to get this off my screen. Hold on a second. Great. Get that off my screen. There we go. All right. So Eben Alexander is was a neuroscientist who had I guess a death experience. I guess they call it near death, but he like literally, had died and came back after recovering from I think it was a brain aneurysm. He wrote a wonderful, wonderful book about it. And his follow-up book was called Living in a Mindful Universe. I highly recommend his books. But this quote from his second book, Living in a Mindful Universe, really struck me because it very much aligns with what I'll be teaching tonight. That the reason the entire universe exists is to experience and create this grand evolution of consciousness. And why I like this quote so much is that, first of all, it talks about purpose. And I'm going to go into this a little bit more tonight. I have a very strong belief in teaching about your life purpose, about our life purpose. And so I like that Dr. Alexander here says that the entire reason that the universe exists is to, and then the next part that I really love about this is to experience and create. So what I love about that is that I think a lot of times we can get lulled into the false notion that we are here being the recipients of what's happening in and around our lives. We can get lulled into the false belief that we are here just being the passive recipients of life. So I love what he says, that we are here to experience it, but we are also here to create. And then this next thing I love that he says is this grand evolution of consciousness. So central to what I'm going to be talking about tonight and central to my teaching is that we are here on purpose to generate, to awaken in consciousness, to consciously evolve, and to consciously evolve in a particular way. So I just wanted to set up our discussion tonight with this quote and to get us all thinking a little bit. So I want to talk a little bit about what I'm going to cover tonight. So what we're going to cover is understanding what consciousness is, how my definition of it, and what some of the differences are in the field of consciousness studies, how to start understanding and dealing with your inner world of thought. I'm going to give you some statistics about your thought world that might be interesting to you, and we'll just delve into how to understand your inner world of thought and also how to deal with it. We're going to talk about how to raise consciousness and how to generate positive emotion, one of the ways of raising consciousness. and how to switch your inner world of thought from perhaps the lower vibration negative thoughts of worry, angst, judgment, to higher vibration thoughts. And then I'll also go over the exact steps that I took to take my life from hot mess to happy and blessed. Okay, so that's what we're going to talk about tonight, and how this will be most impactful for you. You know, I didn't wake up this morning thinking, oh gosh, I hope I make no difference on that webinar tonight. I did not. I woke up this morning thinking, like, I really want to make a difference. I hope that the people who come will leave having a higher vibe and a higher sense of hope and optimism and possibility in their lives. So how this will be most impactful for you is for you to put some skin in the game and to listen to me tonight through, thank you, Teresa, to listen to me tonight through the lens of what's in it for you. What's working you in your life? Like, where are you incomplete, frustrated, not fulfilled, uncertain about how to deal with some area of consciousness or life itself? So what I want you to do now, I hope you've got a notepad in front of you, because goodness knows I might say something brilliant that you want to write down. That's my intention anyway. I might say something, funny, brilliant, and life-changing. So on your notepad, I'd like you to just take a minute and reflect on what we're going to cover, the topic itself of quantum consciousness, and why you're here. See, what's going to be most impactful for you is to listen to me through the lens of your life. So go ahead and jot that down on your notepad. I'll give you a minute to do that. And then I'm going to ask that you drop it into the chat so that I can actually see what's working and, what's working some of you. What is it that you want to get out of our time together tonight? And those of you who've taken classes with me, I start every program like this, whether it's a 20-minute talk at a church or a 3-semester long class. Susan says curiosity. Okay. Curiosity about what, Susan? Be a little more specific. About the topic itself, maybe, is what you mean. Carolyn wants to learn something. Okay, Carolyn, but what do you want to learn? Let's get a little more specific. Let's get really into, like, what's in it for me? What would have you leave here tonight? Like, oh my God, that was just amazing. Go ahead. A couple more people drop clarity. Awesome. Carolyn, thank you. Raise my consciousness and move towards my purpose. Love that, Mauricio. Absolutely. That is totally my goal tonight. Couple more. What's your intention? What do you want to get out of being here? Just drop it in the chat. Move toward your purpose, Ursula. Great. How to live from a quantum place. I love that, Cheryl. Yeah, me too, right? I want to get that. To understand my oneness, to rise my consciousness and shine. I love that. I'm excited. Whoa, hold on. Now they're going too fast. Excited about all of the topics you mentioned in your email, but especially how to turn negative into something positive, negative energy into positive, abundance, higher vibe, raise my vibration. What might be holding me back as I move towards stepping into my new life role as a mindfulness teacher? That's awesome, Cindy. Curious about your perspective on quantum consciousness. All right, awesome. Thank you, guys. That is so great. So how I want you to listen tonight is through that lens of where you are in your life. It matters, how you'll get the most out of this is really by listening through where you're stuck, where you're stopped, where you want to grow. So let's talk a little bit about understanding quantum consciousness. So some of the teachers and speakers in the consciousness field use the phrase local and non-local mind. And they refer to those two things, local mind and non-local mind, as your individual consciousness being the local mind, and the non-local mind being, if you will, the mind of God, the mind of the universe, the universal intelligence that orchestrates all of life, whatever phrase you use for that. Albert Einstein says, I want to know the mind of God. Everything else is just the details. So Einstein used that phrase, mind of God. In understanding quantum consciousness, what I am talking about is that connection between the consciousness, if you will, the mind of God, the mind of the universe, that there is a universal intelligence that orchestrates everything in life that is an energy. It's not a person. That's one of the things that I'm really passionate that people begin to understand is when you're talking about quantum consciousness or you're talking about God, you're talking about the animating energy of the universe. What animates all things, all life, my life right now, my cat on the couch, you sitting there, the energy that animates the internet and the computers that we're using. All of life operates through this just incredibly intricate and complex energetic maze. You are a part of that. So in understanding quantum consciousness, what I want you to think about is where you connect to the web of life, the web of energy that life is. See, what I believe is that wherever you are in consciousness, wherever your resonant energy is, determines the outcome of your life, determines where, if you will, where you connect on the energetic matrix of life itself. Life, all of life operates through intricate energy. And where you connect is contingent upon the consciousness that you live in. That is what I am talking about when I use the phrase quantum consciousness. Living in quantum consciousness means this. It means that you live beyond the notion that your life is determined by external factors. You get beyond the notion that your life is the way it is because of your circumstances. Now, I want to stop right there because that is like a really big notion for most people. I was a psychotherapist for 30 years. I did hundreds of thousands of hours with thousands of clients, listening to people talk about their lives. And I can fairly guarantee you this. I do not remember once that I had a psychotherapy client come into my office, sit in the chair and say, I'm here because of how I think or how I feel. People came to my therapy office talking about their spouse, their job, their coworkers, their problems with their kids. Even those people that came to my office because they had problems, say, with alcohol, problems with drugs. What they would talk about is not, I have a problem with drugs and alcohol. They would talk about the problem with their spouse's complaint about their alcohol, or the probation officer having it out for them because of alcohol. I worked in prisons with male sex offenders. Not one of those male sex offenders began their therapy with me talking about themselves. Are you resonating with this? Just today, I had a coaching call with an incredibly successful woman who lives in the Middle East, just incredibly competent and mindful and awake and aware. And she began the entire probably 45 minutes of the 60-minute call. No, that's probably not true. Probably 30 to 35 minutes of the 60-minute call talking about her son, her boss, her employer, her husband, all of these things that were happening to her. And after about 30, 35 minutes, I said to her, are you ready to actually look at what you can do, what your part of this is? And she said, yes. And I really appreciated that. And we spent about 10 or 15 minutes with me giving her some structures, some practices that she could do about those circumstances to change how she's thinking and how she's feeling. And within 10 minutes, her entire energy changed from kind of angry and resigned to a sense of like peacefulness and optimism in 10 minutes time. And the only thing I did was redirect her consciousness from what's happening out there to what's happening in here. Did you follow that? So living in quantum consciousness means that you get beyond this notion of that your life is contingent on what's happening to you. In fact, That's right. I was just going to say that abundance for freedom for everyone. I was just going to say what you put in the chat. Everything happens for you, not to you. When I said in fact and opened the chat window, that is exactly what I was about to say. So that is so cool. I love that. So living in quantum consciousness from a high consciousness perspective, you do not relate to life like it's happening to you. Life is happening for you. And in fact, life is happening through you. Life is happening as you. There is no out there. There is your, stay with me on this, there is your consciousness outpictured. I've said that to people before who didn't know what I meant by that. So I want to just slow down a little bit. Your external world, I want you to begin thinking about it this way and write this down if you're taking notes. Your external world is a result of your inner world of consciousness outpictured, meaning it's a picture that gets created outside of you based on your inner world of consciousness. And I'm going to keep deepening this. So if you're like, what, what does this mean? I'm going to keep deepening what I mean by all of this. So for now, I want to really begin diving into this, that living in quantum consciousness means living beyond the external conditions. All right, let me check the chat. Yeah, Phyllis uses stop playing the victim, right? But all of the suffering comes from not accepting what is in our life. It causes so much resistance, right? Exactly, Teresa. It's the resistance to what's so that causes your suffering. That was one of the things that I said to my client, my coaching client today, because she was telling me that she had accepted what it had, some difficult things that happened with her husband. Well, I've accepted it. And though I had to very gingerly and gently say, if you had accepted it, if you truly have practiced acceptance, that negative angst, angry, blaming energy would no longer be there. And again, because she's just an incredible human being, she's like, you're absolutely right. I still have work to do on acceptance. So let's move on. So you want to begin seeing your reality, like the way that my life is, not as your external circumstances and conditions, but seeing your reality as the energetic field that you are constantly creating. Your external world, your experience of life, isn't just randomly happening. Your external world and the life that you're living, your reality, if you will, is a result as the energetic field that you are engaged in and constantly creating. So what do I mean by that? I'm going to give you even a worse, horrible phrase. You might want to write this down so you can look at it later. The quality of your life. Okay, so just kind of think about that. The quality of your life, your sense of happiness and satisfaction, how good you feel about yourself, your level of confidence, you're feeling connected with people. So the quality of your life is equivalent to the vibratory pattern of your consciousness. So look, first of all, nobody talks like this. I don't want you to go into the workplace tomorrow and just be like, hey, I was on this webinar last night, and what I learned is that the quality of your life is the equivalent of the vibratory pattern of your consciousness. Don't do that. People will call 911. They'll think something is seriously wrong with you. Nobody talks this way, right? So it's okay if you're like, what? That's the craziest thing I've ever heard. It's okay. I'm going to break it down a little bit. It's so great. I'm glad you appreciated that, Phyllis. Thank you, Teresa. Right. So don't worry about it. Don't go in talking like this. But what this means is I love this notion, because we're living at such an extraordinarily exciting time where science and spirituality are actually converging to show scientifically that what some new thought religions have taught for hundreds of years are exactly the same thing. And what science is now telling us is that the way that you think, the way that you feel creates an electromagnetic energy around you that is 3 to 5 feet outside of you, that you can feel when you walk in a room. that you can feel when you come home at night. And if your spouse is looking a certain way, you can feel the vibration of the people and the places that you are in. So the quality of your life is the equivalent of the vibratory pattern of your consciousness. But what you need to begin understanding, and what I hope this class is going to show you tonight, is that you have every capacity to mold and create your vibratory pattern. You have the capacity to actually generate the consciousness. Going back to the quote by Ibn Alexander, that the whole purpose of the universe is to experience and create this grand evolution of consciousness, not just to experience it, but experience and create it. And I'm going to talk tonight about how it is that we do that. All right. I'm just going to pause there for a minute. I'm going to give you a second to absorb what I'm saying. Yeah, I love that, Phyllis. Be a vibrational match for what you attract. You know, Phyllis, I have to tell you something really funny. You know, those like card decks that have beautiful art and sayings on them. I don't know exactly what it's called, but a friend of mine had one of those that was from Abraham Hicks. And she's like, oh, go ahead, just take one. And this is so funny. This is years and years ago before I've taught a lot of what I teach now. And I pulled a card that said, if you do not have what you want in life, it's because you are yet to be a vibratory match for your desire. And I read the card out loud and I looked at my friend, it was Patty Barkus. Some of you on this call know her. I looked at the card, I looked at Patty Barkus and I was like, that's such bullshit. Like, who talks like that? What does that mean, being a vibratory match for your desire? And, but it stuck with me. And I put it in a notebook of mine and I carried it with me for, literally, I don't know, for years, until I literally got to the point where I was teaching that notion in one of my programs called Living a Transcendent Life. Isn't that awesome? So you're absolutely right. Being a vibratory match. I did wonder who talks like this, but this is actually healthy. Ursula, that's great. I love that. Yeah, this is how I want our world to start thinking. This is how I want our world to start talking, understanding that we are not just passive recipients of what's happening in our world. Because look, guys, there's some deep shit happening in this world. Have you noticed? We are at a time that there are so many things opening up and converging, that we have such an extraordinary opportunity to begin consciously creating the experience of life that we want to have. All right. Oops, sorry. Got to move one more thing on my screen. Okay, good. So let's dive in now. And I want to give you my definition of what consciousness is. So I'm going to give you the definition. I'm going to say a few things about it. So my definition of consciousness is literally the vibratory pattern that gets created by your inner world of belief, emotion, attitude, and thought. Your consciousness is the vibe, if you will, the vibratory pattern created by your beliefs, emotions, attitudes, and thoughts. So again, what I want to say about this is that your inner world, if we were to hook you up to an electrocardiogram and we were measuring the electromagnetic energy of your heart, and we showed you videos of, disturbing scenes, violence or frightening things, and then we had you do some meditation, the electromagnetic energy, the vibration of your heart energy would drastically change. So the energy of your heart, and then the same thing, if we hooked you up to an EKG, an EEG, and followed you don't even need to hook you up any longer. There's something now called the electromagnetogram that can be all done with magnets. You don't even need all those things on your head. And we show you different images. The energy created by your inner world creates and emits an external vibratory pattern. What else I want to say about, so that's my definition of consciousness. Okay. What I want to say about this is that I'm so fascinated that there are so many people out there now who are consciousness teachers. I'm just one of many. And what I noticed over the years, as more and more people have entered the field and the science is kind of expanding and understanding consciousness, what I noticed, because I study and read lots and lots of people on this topic, is that I was not seeing even two people that had this, two teachers, thinkers, that had the exact same definition of consciousness. Go out and research it a little bit. Do a Google search on definition of consciousness. You're going to find a massive array of definitions of that word. And I thought, well, that's really interesting, because if there's no real definition out there, then it made it easier for me to create my own. And as I've done my research, a lot of consciousness teachers are beginning to talk about the vibration and vibratory pattern. So I did a conscious living summit this past fall where I brought in, I don't know, 15 or 20 different consciousness teachers and speakers. And I asked all of them this question: what's your definition of consciousness? And I did not hear the same thing twice. I want to say a little bit more about this. And that is, as you begin to understand consciousness, a lot of consciousness teachers use the phrase, say that your consciousness is the same as your awareness. Maybe some of you thought that, like, what's consciousness mean? Well, I don't know. It means what I'm aware of. It means my awareness. I actually want to say that I don't believe that's true. I believe that your awareness, meaning your ability to observe yourself, to accurately observe yourself, and notice what you're doing with your thoughts. Notice what's happening in your emotional world. Your ability to accurately observe yourself is your access point to observing and changing your consciousness. Meaning, I get an upsetting email from a friend, or my son texts me and something that I'm kind of hassled by. I don't, it's like, oh, that's such a pain. My awareness gives me the capacity to say, oh, wow, notice how you're responding to that message. That's awareness. Notice that you just got ticked off by that request. Notice that you just felt slighted by that message. Notice that that's how you're responding. So my consciousness in that moment is the vibratory pattern of feeling slighted. Or, stay with me on this, it's the vibratory pattern of my using my awareness to say, oh, I'm feeling slighted. I wonder what I'm making that mean. Maybe I don't feel as skilled as that teacher, therefore I feel diminished by that comment. Maybe I don't feel I'm as competent or as well known as that teacher, therefore I feel slighted. In that moment of saying, oh, that's what I'm making it mean, I have the opportunity to, and this is such an important teaching point, I have the opportunity to remind myself that my thoughts are not true. And by the way, neither are yours. Your thoughts are not true, they're just what you think. So when you use your awareness to observe your thoughts, then recognize that your thoughts aren't true, what can you do? You can immediately change your interpretation, change your perception. When you change your perception to what the external stimuli is, you raise your consciousness. I'm gonna go read the chat. Give me a second. I don't agree with consciousness being the same as awareness either, Jackie. It's very different. Awesome, Teresa. Thank you. Yeah, I do believe it's really different. They're two. And in fact, I was just reading a really good book, which I highly recommend. Wait, all right, let me say that and then I'll go back to the chat. I was just reading a really good book by Dawson Church called Mind to Matter. And in that book, he says, I define consciousness as awareness. And then later, just a few paragraphs later, he's talking about consciousness as being your thoughts and emotions. I wish I had his phone number. I'd love to call him and point that out to him. He says X on one page and Y on another page. So I think it's really important that we start understanding and thinking more critically. And for those of you who are science and spirituality and consciousness geeks like I am, there's a really good article that was published about 3 years ago in Scientific American, the journal Scientific American. And the title of the article is something like, "The hippies were right. It is all about your vibe." And it's an article about consciousness, and that consciousness is made up of your vibration. So I don't remember exactly what, it was about 3 years ago, but if you did a Google search, Scientific American, the hippies were right, it is all about your vibe. All right, I want to go and read, gosh, these are wonderful comments. I wonder who talks like this, but it's actually healthy. I love it. I like them here. Our world needs to start thinking like this and taking ownership of their destiny. Absolutely, Cindy. I'm so excited about the people that I met from Iran, like having this extraordinary experience with people who are from a Muslim country, who are students of the Quran. I did a lot of my teaching on consciousness in front of this group. And one of the gentlemen came to me after my 3-day presentation, and he is a dual PhD, and his father also has a PhD in philosophy with an emphasis on the Quran, and they want to write up my book using the Quran as the spiritual references rather than Christian references. So I just, when you say the world needs to start thinking this way, how many billions of Muslims are there in the world, that I would love to be one of the people to bring this thinking into that community. The acceptance of this definition gives the possibility of choosing an empowering life. I love, exactly, Cindy. That is so, so brilliant. I don't agree with consciousness. I already read that one. I agree. Consciousness can be elevated and we can exist at a higher level. Exactly. Oh, you guys you're my tribe. Teresa says, interesting fact, in Danish, my mother tongue, and other languages, there's no distinguishment when translating consciousness and awareness. That's also true in sign language, Teresa. And when I teach these courses in sign language, I actually had to make up, because the word for awareness and consciousness were the same. So I actually made up a sign that was the sign for awareness, but then like a spherical cylinder around me. So the consciousness field, or the awareness field that you are in. So that was something I had to do a few years ago, that when I began teaching in sign language, teaching these courses in sign language. Have I read Psycho-Cybernetics, Carolyn? Yes, I have. I'm ordering that book. How funny that you mentioned that. Oh, Psycho-Cybernetics. Cool, cool, cool. Rereading it now. Awesome. Yeah, it was years ago, Carolyn, but I did read it. I don't think I remember a thing about it, so maybe I'll reread it as well. Awesome. About sign language. Yeah, Teresa, I'm fluent in American Sign Language, and one of our participants tonight, Ursula, is a deaf participant who's using the captions. So that's another part of my career and working in the deaf community. Awesome. All right. So it sounds like we're all very much aligned, very much on the same page, and that you guys are very much following what it is that I'm teaching you tonight. So just in summary of where we've gone so far, I think this just makes it a quick and easy way to remember what I've said. Your beat, and that stands for your beliefs, emotions, attitudes, and thoughts. Okay. So that's that inner domain. And I just made up this silly acronym. Your beat creates your vibe that creates your life. Right. So your beat is the inner world. And I just made this stuff up. So but I think it's helpful to have these kind of acronyms that help remind you, what's my beat right now? How's your vibe? I do professional development work around these topics, leadership program called Transformational Leader as Coach. And when I teach to a group of people, they all walk around like, how's your vibe? And they say to each other, high vibe, high vibe. I just want to be in a high vibe. And it's nice to be able to have a whole community, a whole work community of colleagues sharing the same language, sharing the same notions. And that, like many of you have said on the chat, that's my vision for the world, that this does become kind of commonplace language. So to make it just easy and simple, your beat creates your vibe, your beliefs, emotions, attitudes, and thoughts create the vibratory pattern that you live in. That is the determining factor of where you connect in life. Again, let me just give you a simple, concrete example. Years ago, my spouse and I decided to do some home renovations a couple years after we bought our home. And we just decided it would be fun. We were going to GC it, not do the hammer and nails. We were going to do the demo. We're really good at tearing things apart, but that we would be the general contractor. We would hire the carpenters and the electricians and do the work to put our house back together. So I have a dear friend who is a real estate mogul. He owns millions of dollars of real estate and all across New England. And when I told him our plan that we were going to GC this project, GC means general contractor, by the way. I'm using these terms if anyone doesn't know that. We were going to be the general contractor hiring our subcontractors. When I told my friend that, he's like, oh my God, you're going to have so much problem. You can't get good help. Nobody comes in on time. People don't show up. You know, the cost overruns are like so crazy. You're not going to believe what a difficult time you're going to have. And I was like, wow. And in fact, I'd known him for 10, 12 years. And when he said that, it was like, wow, I do hear him complaining a lot about his contractors and the roofing guy and the plumber. He's always complaining about all this real estate he owns and the problems he has with contractors. And in that moment, I just decided that's not going to be my vibe. I don't want to create that experience. So we got into the project, and one night on a Friday or Saturday night, I don't remember which it was, but I remember it was late at night and it was a Friday or a Saturday. And my spouse and I and our neighbor were laying hardwood floors in one of the bedrooms. And I was hitting the pneumatic hammer, which is a power hammer. And I couldn't get the nails to go into the hardwood floor. It was just sticking up like a 1/16 of an inch, but it wasn't going all the way in. I was like, I don't know what's wrong. And so I'd rented the hammer from Home Depot. So I called Home Depot and I talked to the pneumatic hammer department guy. And he's like, oh, well, I don't know. You know, maybe there's something wrong with the hammer. I don't know. But look, it's 9:30. I'm off at 10 o'clock. We close at 10. Why don't I come over or bring you one and see what I can see if it's broken? I was like, the Home Depot guy is going to come to my house. So not only did the Home Depot guy come to my house, he brought a backup pneumatic hammer and he stayed until midnight and helped us finish laying the floor. Now, stay with me here. If that happened to my friend who believed that you can't get good help, that contractors are a problem, that everybody is a hassle, do you think that that would have turned out that way? See, I heard what he said, and I chose in that moment to instill in myself a belief that we would have like great vibes, great contractors, great people helping us. And I believe that that vibration went out into the universe, created the energetic matrix for that man to answer the phone and be like, hey, why don't I come over? I'll bring a hammer. What the heck? I'll hang around and help you finish your floor. So when I say your beat creates your vibe that creates your life, and it connects you to the grid of life itself, that's what I'm talking about. Things that you could say are just mere coincidences don't turn out to be coincidences at all. It is your inner world out pictured and reflected back to you. All right, I'm gonna go back to the chat. Hold on one second. The opportunity to really make a difference. Thank you, Patricia. I did. Right, serendipity does not happen by accident. You guys are brilliant. Just, do you mean some people are not as connected to their soul? Everyone else, no way would I miss. I would personally say the attitude is the precursor for our actions. Attitude is a state of being or vibration or thought you take on. You guys are amazing. You're like so my tribe. I feel like I could take this chat and we could turn it into a blog post because your comments are just so brilliant. Question, Teresa says, I know and understand that everything without exception is animated by and contains essence and matrix of God, but not everyone has a soul. Well, that's interesting. I don't know that to be true, but I'll just stay with that thought. So not all that exists is sentient. Am I trying to understand why there's a difference when we were created from the same substance? Can you elaborate on that? I hope you understand my question. So I think I understand your question, Teresa. I guess I just don't understand. I don't agree with it. I think that even like a slug, an ant, has some form of sentience. Everything, every created thing has some kind of vibratory pattern and sentience to it. There's a comment going down here. No, I mean that our furniture or many inanimate things. Yeah, an AI, something with consciousness or not. They do not have a soul. Yes, yes, yes. But I want to know everything has a soul. Everything comes from. So I don't know that I don't know that my computer that I'm using right now has a soul. I wouldn't go that far. Animals, insects have a soul and sentient. Okay. So I wouldn't say that my computer has a soul, but my computer has a vibration to it. My phone, this microphone, everything around me has a vibration to it. I have a whole section of my book on calming the chaos about having your environment, your physical environment, be well managed. because there's actual research that says that people that live in chaotic physical environments are less productive than people that live in well-organized environments. I believe that the reason for that is that a chaotic physical environment, the physical things in your environment, create incoherence that reduce the effectiveness of your inner world of thought. I hope that makes sense, Teresa. And I'm going to just follow it up with a little example. I was hired several years ago by a brilliant author who had published several books on computer technology, several textbooks. He was a textbook writer, and he had a textbook that he had to complete. Like, I think he was down to 3 or 4 months. He had to get it completed, and he had just hit a complete block. So this was like his 4th textbook, very well known in the field, renowned author. Everybody was counting on him for this next textbook, and he couldn't get it done. And a former client of mine recommended that he contact me. So I listened to him, and I was like, I'm no expert. This was actually before I'd written any of my books. I'm no expert on writing a book, but I said, I have some questions for you. And I asked him, what does your physical environment look like? And he had that look on his face, right? Of like, oh shit. And so I had him send me some pictures of his physical environment. I mean, it was like right out of the Hoarders TV show, just piles of journals, 2 or 3 computer screens. Funny, I can still see the picture in my mind, like a coffee cup on top of one of his computers, Windex spray on top of a pile. It was just a disaster. So I said, your first task is to just go clean that up. And he said he almost fired me. If he wasn't so desperate, he would have fired me, because he could not in his mind have any connection between what his physical environment was like and his productivity was like. But it took him probably 2 or 3 weeks to clean out his office. Within 2 or 3 weeks, he was back writing again, and he finished on time for his deadline. So I believe that there may not be sentience to everything, but everything has a vibratory pattern to it. So understanding that, and then using that information to determine how you live in your physical environment is a big part of what I teach in pretty much all of my courses. All right, I hope that was helpful, Teresa, and I hope that's what you're asking. If I finish, remove the clutter, basically, Carolyn, thank you. I hope to have time tonight to do some discussion and Q&A if we get through everything. So I want to get into this whole notion about negative thoughts and just your thought world in general. So this is based on some research that the average thinker has about 12,000 thoughts per day, and all the way up to more kind of creative, engaged thinkers have around 80,000 thoughts per day. I have no idea how they figure these things out. I'm just giving you the research that I've seen. So, and what the research shows, I think this is out of Johns Hopkins, but don't quote me on that because I don't have it in front of me. But somewhere upwards of 80% of the energy in our inner world of thought is what's considered kind of low vibe thoughts, comparison, judgment, worry, some kind of negativity in your inner world of thought. Now, a good portion of your thought is just repetitious kind of mental meandering. It's called your default mode network. Your mental meandering, when you're not trying to think about anything, but your mind is doing what it does, that is called your default mode network. And when your default mode network is not trained, somewhere around 80% of your inner world will be in the more kind of negative realm. Now, you've probably, given the comments that I'm seeing on the chat, I'm sure you guys already know this, but I'll just say a little bit about it. The reason for that, and this is why I think this is really important to talk about, because a lot of people, when they don't understand their inner world of thought better, and they have this kind of like negative, maybe depressive, what's wrong with me, kind of negative inner world, they literally think there's something wrong with them. Now, that's not to say that there aren't cases of anxiety and depression that get into your thoughts and cause that, but most people have this kind of protective, careful inner world of thought because it's where we are evolutionarily. That is where we are in the evolution of consciousness. So when you understand that, that opens the door to recognize, oh, there's nothing wrong with me, other than the fact that, and this isn't what's wrong with you, but the possibility that exists. Please understand this. When you understand that just if my inner world is kind of negative, it's because that's where we are in our human evolution. And the minute you understand that, it opens the door to the possibility that you can then begin using your mind to train your brain to evolutionarily develop in a more positive way, a higher vibratory way. So what do I mean by that? In human evolution, our brain has been programmed for us to survive. And in order for us to survive, we have to constantly be looking out for what could be wrong. Where we're at in human evolution, and I really think we're on the cusp of this changing. Jean Houston uses the phrase jump time to talk about how kind of human evolution goes along, maybe a little bit changes, and then there's a radical shift in how we operate as human beings. I think we are in an evolutionary jump time. So that when you recognize that you actually can train your inner world to change how your brain functions, that's going to be a dramatic turning point in human evolution. So what I want to say about this slide is, you have however many thoughts a day you have, lots of them, let's just say. I'm going to suggest you are probably upwards of the 80,000, you're more creative, introspective thinkers. A lot of your inner world might be kind of on the lower vibe scale. That doesn't mean anything, except you're experiencing the effects of an untrained mind, an untrained consciousness. And as soon as you know and understand that, it opens up the world, it opens up the possibility. Because why most people struggle with negative thinking is because they are not trained and taught otherwise. The problem is, I just think this is, if you take nothing else away from tonight's conversation, take this away. Your thoughts are not true. They're not true. They are just your thoughts. Your thoughts don't define you any more than your right or left hand defines you. Just like vision is the function of your eyes, thinking is the function of your brain. And when your thoughts are untrained, they will just go along in response to your evolutionary patterning and your cultural conditioning. Are you following that? When your thoughts are untrained, they'll just be a regurgitation of your evolutionary development and the cultural context you're living in. So why most people struggle with negative thinking is that they think their thoughts are true. And so they hang on to them and they try to understand them and they try to, figure it out, and they try to understand why they think that way. I was a therapist for a really long time. I often wish I could give people the experience of somehow, summarizing 30 years of hundreds of thousands of hours listening to human beings talk about their lives so that you could each see how similar each person's experience of their inner world was. We think that our thoughts are unique to us. They're less unique than you might think. So take away from this conversation tonight that your thoughts are a result of your evolutionary development and the cultural conditioning that you are a part of. Your thoughts are not true. They are not capital T truth. They don't define you. So a lot of times I'll have, just like you and everyone else, and certainly for myself with a long history of clinical depression, I'm no longer on medication for it, but I was for many years. So for myself with a long history of clinical depression, I tend toward the depressive. My interpretations of things tend to be more fraught with fear and anxiety and pessimism. I do not wake up. I just, naturally, have this high vibe. Like, I know I look like I do, but believe me, this has been a shit ton of work to get myself this way, right? But one of the big turning points for me now is when I have those thoughts, I just don't care that I have them. They just don't mean anything to me. This gig that I just did in the Seychelles Islands off the coast of East Africa, this group that I spoke for, the Iranian Impactors Club, they have an annual meditation retreat, mindfulness and meditation retreat. And last year's speaker was the Dalai Lama. So you can imagine what was in my head about doing this gig, right? You can imagine the things I was saying to myself. And the only thing that saved me from going absolutely batshit crazy before this gig, knowing that I'm in front of, 80, 90, 100 Iranian CEO millionaires and billionaires who have last year studied with the Dalai Lama, the only thing that saved me was that thought's not true. That thought's not true. That's just a thought. That's just a perception. Oh, that's a belief. So why most people struggle with negative thinking is because they believe what they think. All right, let me go read the chat. You guys are so chatty on chat. We teach what we need to learn, right? Next year I can carry your bags. Gotcha, Cindy. That would be fun. It was amazing. And they did invite me back for next year, by the way. Do you think it's easier to change our vibration from a level of emotion or from a level of thought? I'm going to get into that, Teresa. That's a great question. Incredibly astute question. Carolyn says misbeliefs. I love that. That's awesome. People also think that their beliefs and their mindsets are true. No, absolutely, Cindy. Yeah. We think our emotions are true. We think our beliefs are true. That's one of my favorite sayings when people are in some kind of conflict. I will just point out to people, that's a belief. Like, oh, that's a belief. That's a belief. It's not necessarily a truth, like a capital T truth. It's just what you believe. And that is not to invalidate what you believe. It's not to invalidate what you believe, but it is to point out that your beliefs are not facts. Your perceptions are not truth. All right. Yeah, you are changing from being a victim to a victor. Absolutely, Mary. Thank you for that affirmation. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it gets passed down from elders, grandparents. It's generational. Ages 0 to 7, we absorb everything like sponges. That's an interesting thought. Do we absorb everything like sponges from 0 to 7? I think we're absorbing everything like sponges forever. Maybe there's more malleability and neurologically from 0 to 7 and psychologically from 0 to 7, but we are constantly, kind of receiving the vibratory patterns of those around us. Okay, let me see. All right. So how you change your negative patterns of thinking is simply by raising your consciousness. That's an obvious. And I want to be clear. I said to in the notes about tonight's class that I was going to talk to you about your life purpose. So I want to teach you what I teach in all of my programs about life purpose, because it is an important thing to understand. One of the top Google searches every year is how do I know my purpose, or what is my life purpose? And I actually believe that it's not, your life purpose is not something that needs to be sorted out, figured out, discerned, or, written volumes in your journal about. I have a belief that I want to share with you tonight, and I invite you to embrace it, at least for the duration of this call. And my belief about life purpose, about your purpose, my purpose, and the purpose of humanity is that we are here to grow in consciousness. We are here to grow in consciousness kind of from these low, and I'm going to go into exactly what I mean by that, but I want you to just take that in first, that we do have a purpose. There is a purpose to life, all life. And again, the first quote that I used from Ibn Alexander, we are here to experience and create this grand evolution of consciousness. So your purpose in life is to create your grand evolution and elevation of consciousness. Cool? So what do I mean by that? Some of you, thank you, Teresa. Some of you have seen this before because you've been students of mine. Some of you have been on other webinars of mine, but I invite you to relate to it like you've never seen it before. Holy cow, this is cool. What's this new thing? Okay, beginner's mind. I'll do the same. So because I'm a consciousness teacher and have taught it for many, many years, I have studied the work of Dr. David Hawkins, who has a consciousness model that is 17 levels high, and Dr. Bruce Schneider, who is 7 levels, Dr. Ken Wilber, and I'm sorry, he's not a doctor, Ken Wilber, who has a 10-level model. And I synthesized all of these different consciousness models into something that I feel is easier to digest and much more usable for people. So this is the vibe model, or the model of energetic consciousness that I created and that I teach from. At the lower levels, you'll see that there's this sense of survival and stress on the right-hand side. Survival consciousness is simply, kind of the notion of like, God, life is hard and just screw it. It's just hard, just screw it. Any addict has said that. Most of the men who I worked with in the sex offender unit said that, like, it's just too hard, just screw it. So there's a sense of apathy and resignation. And in therapy, we say help rejecting complainer, where somebody's like, help me. Oh, no, that's not going to work. Oh, can you give me some help? Oh, you just don't understand. Right. So that's this kind of survival level of consciousness where things are really difficult. And I'm just going to sit this one out. It's just too hard. In the middle of the spiral on the bottom orange, you'll see the words fully outer. What that means is where people locate the problem in survival consciousness is outside of them. It's the economy, it's the parole officer, it's the president, it's my spouse, it's the kids. So therefore, I'm off the hook. So as you grow in consciousness, you move up to stress consciousness, where it's still really hard, but there in this level of consciousness, it's like, I got to work hard. I got to get it figured out. I got to do more. And there's a sense of kind of anxiety driven, overwhelmed stress. It's just really hard. And you'll see in the green, the word that says outer. The problem is still pretty much out there, but there's some things I can do about it. As moving up the levels of consciousness, you see that there's transformation consciousness, which is the first level of consciousness where you get beyond the notion that life is hard. You start relating that life just is. And because you see life as it just is, your orientation is more inward. It's up to me, my consciousness, my vibe, my hope, optimism, clarity, my love and compassion for other people is what gives me my experience of life. It's a very transformed way of thinking and being in the world. And then moving up to the highest level, transcendence consciousness. This is the consciousness of spiritual masters, people who are living in a sense of unconditional love, equanimity, peace. The Buddha, Dalai Lama, Mother Teresa, Gandhi. They certainly people have walked among us, but it's pretty few and far between. And the experience there is fully inner. There's a recognition that the only out there is an outpicturing of my inner world. And then the last thing I'll point out is you notice this arrow that goes up and down the middle. That means that your consciousness is not a static thing. It's fluid. You're going up and down your levels of consciousness all the time. So that's the consciousness model. So when I say that your purpose in life is to elevate your consciousness, what I mean by that is we are here to grow in consciousness from these levels of survival and stress, which, by the way, consciousness research, Dr. David Hawkins' research shows that the majority of mainstream America, contemporary culture, is right between the survival and stress level of consciousness. Kind of like if these numbers were 1, 2, 3, and 4, starting at the bottom, it would be about 1.7, not quite yet to stress consciousness. So the majority of the people that you are around when you go to the grocery store, or you're going into the workplace, or you're, going to the gym, wherever, the majority of mass culture, Thanksgiving dinner next week, the majority of people are living in the sense of like, life is hard and I'm just getting by and I gotta get going. I mean, look around. We have evidence of this everywhere. Just pull up a Twitter feed or your social media. Now, again, your social media is probably not going to be reflective of that, because I'm just getting the sense from your comments and the fact that you would even come to a webinar like this, that you are engaged at a higher level of consciousness in the, high stress transformation, maybe even moving into the transcendence realm of consciousness. But as you look around what's happening in our world, you can really see this kind of is where humanity is functioning. And I'm going to just go over here and check the chat for a second. I would dare say that the Dalai Lama's, few moments where humanity wins. That is what makes him so delightful, humble, and approachable. Yeah, absolutely. I love that. Love the vibe model graph. That's awesome. Feel free to take a picture of it. Guessing the up and down arrows indicate that we're moving to different levels of consciousness every day without realizing it. Exactly. Wish I could detect that shift better in myself. Yeah, but you're just starting. Like now you have this model. I'm asking myself all the time. And if I don't ask myself, my spouse is very good at asking me, oh, what level of consciousness is that? Right. So it can become part of your family's dialogue. Take a picture of it, put it up on, I have my students when I'm teaching it in a class to put it as their screensaver. I was doing some work at a wonderful university for a few years, and I would see the vibe model in conference rooms, in offices. It's awesome. Oh, thank you, Ursula. What a beautiful thing to say. It's an honor to be here. It's an honor to have you here. I loved our work together. Ursula was one of my students at the university where I was doing this work, and certainly a big advocate of raising the vibe everywhere she went. So it's awesome to see you here tonight. All right, so this is the model that I work from and that I teach from. And when I say that we are here to grow in consciousness, and then I often say back to the divinity from which we came, what I mean by that is getting out of these lower levels of kind of our thought and emotional world into these higher levels. This is the purpose of your life. And in that regard, if you're fulfilling that purpose, in some ways, it matters less what you do. So long as, no matter what you're doing, you're paying attention to growing in consciousness. And I like to kind of map this on, it's probably more than I needed to get into tonight, but it's here. So I don't know. I put it in here. So there's got to be somebody here that needs to hear this tonight. So how I map this onto your way of being. Your way of being is kind of your predominant mode of operating that you show up with in the world. Your pervasive level of consciousness, your way of being. So what this model shows is that at the lowest level of human functioning, you are operating on just pure emotion. Operating on just pure emotion, I really believe, is the lowest level of human functioning, meaning that when you have no, psychological phrase, emotional self-regulation. So you're upset and that's just what comes out, or, you're angry and you lash out, or you feel judged and you pull yourself away. Right. So we all have experiences of lower vibe emotions, feeling judged, comparing ourselves, my whole thing of following the Dalai Lama, and, are they going to like me? Am I going to be okay? If I was given by that emotion, if that's what was my determining factor, if that's how I made my decisions, I never would have gone on that event. So instead of just being given by that emotion of, say, insecurity, uncertainty, I used my intellect to override my emotion, where I could say, well, I've done a few gigs before. I must be the right and perfect one to be there because I was the one who was asked, right? So I can use my intellect to talk back to my emotion and supersede and override it, which is a great way of doing it. It's rationalization. You probably know that phrase from psychology. It's part of how I say, use your mind to train your brain. My brain hardwiring is kind of depressive and anxious from many, many years. But over the years, I've been able to rewire my neurology by using my intellect, talking back to lower emotions. Does that make sense? But still, that's not the highest level of human functioning. As you get really skilled at recognizing that your thoughts and emotions aren't true, and you can debunk your lower vibe thoughts and emotions pretty easily, you use your intellect to override lower vibe emotions, and it all becomes very second nature to you. That raises your vibratory pattern so that you then begin tapping into an intuitive realm of clarity, of purpose, clarity of thought, clarity of direction, that you just kind of then, life gets easier. You have less stuff to figure out. You don't get as stressed about things. One of my friends says, the problems that used to baffle me, I now solve them while standing in line waiting for coffee at Dunkin' Donuts. right? So the things that used to just completely baffle me, I no longer have to stress and worry over. Why? Because I've overcome my emotional realm using the intellect, and I'm tapped in to an intuitive level of living where problems just kind of naturally get solved, and I'm able to tap into higher wisdom. And still, that is not the highest level of living, although it's way easier than being run by emotion and having to constantly think your way out of it with intellect. It's way easier. But as you begin living in the intuitive realm, kind of with answers naturally coming to you, circumstances just arising, miracles unfolding before you, you start moving into this realm of pure knowingness, where you don't even see problems, you only see solutions. You don't get into these fear places about what's happening to our democracy and what's going to happen to the economy. And you immediately see humanity is evolving, and I'm along for the ride. You relate to life in a very different way that's known as a pure knowing that life is evolving exactly as it should. So again, with either of these two models, you can place yourself in different places in different times, depending on, depending on a lot of factors, what's happening around you, what's happening within you, how much sleep you've gotten, what's coming up in your world, and depending on how skilled you've become at training your consciousness to using your mind in a particular way. You guys are awesome. This is a lot of fun. I hope you're enjoying this. All right. So how to raise your vibe and generate positive emotions, the steps that took me from homeless, depressed, addicted, and flat broke to a thriving international business and happily married. I didn't say on there, oh yeah, and battered. I forgot that one. Oh, the stories I could tell you. I have some great stories about surviving domestic violence, by the way, but I'll have to do that on another webinar. So let's talk a little bit about, kind of how do you do this? I have to apologize in advance that I just think through scientific terms. So I'm going to give you the scientific terms, which I think are absolutely obnoxious, but it's good to have the language so that you can start training yourself. So the two ways of changing your inner world, the first is called self-directed neuroplasticity, and the second is called self-generated positive emotion. So self-directed neuroplasticity literally means that how you use your world of thoughts, how you use your brain, changes the structure and function of your brain. So some of you might know this already. How you use your thoughts. So a couple of examples of this. Hold on, there's a couple things I wanted to talk about, but I forgot. All right, never mind. I'm not going to do it right now. So a couple of things that you might know about this, studies that show that just 8 weeks of mindfulness meditation training increase the memory, decrease the anxiety, decrease the depression, and increased an overall sense of well-being in the subjects that were trained in mindfulness meditation in just 8 weeks. And in fact, their frontal lobes of their brain became thicker. So the frontal lobes are your center of reasoning, executive functioning, higher wisdom, higher levels of consciousness, all reside in the frontal lobes. The structure of the frontal lobes after just 8 weeks of mindfulness meditation changed. It is a stunning statistic. I mean, I have tons of research to back this up, but fundamentally, what self-directed neuroplasticity means is that when you train yourself to think more positively, to think higher level, higher consciousness thoughts, to talk back to the lower vibratory thoughts and emotions that you have. Like I said, when I was getting ready for this gig and I would have these thoughts, I could laugh at myself. I could recognize my thoughts weren't true. I could say, is that the experience you want to create? And I could redirect my thinking to literally create in my inner world the positive experience and then the positive emotions that I wanted to have. It requires the level of emotional intelligence and emotional maturity that this requires, it cannot be understated. So you clearly, as I can tell from the comments in the chat and the questions you're asking me, you are clearly already a group of people that, if you will, are not being run by your ego, that you have an ego, that your ego is in service to your executive functioning, but you already are a group of people that can say, yeah, I get it. My thoughts aren't true. I get it. Just because I feel this way doesn't make, doesn't make it the gospel truth. So when you recognize that your thoughts and emotions aren't true, it opens the door. If it's not true, then what do I want to think? If it's not true, then how do I want to feel? Because you have to really understand that the way that you're using your mind creates an energetic field. And I want to give you a study to a couple of evidence to back this up. There was a study done by the City College of New York by Bill Bensington and Dave Kringsley. And what these two researchers did was they took two groups of rats, the control group and the example group, or whatever you call the non-control group. And they took, they infused one of the groups, I don't know which one it is, the ones that got the shots, with cancer cells. And the other group did not get cancer cells. No, I'm sorry. They infused all the rats with cancer cells. And then the control group, they took the control group rats, and Bill Bensington every day for an hour sat with one rat at a time, holding it on his lap in a cage, sending it love, putting his hands around the cage, generating positive emotion, self-generated positive emotion, generating love for the rat, generating just as the emotion of love and healing and sending it positive energy, generating positive thoughts. Now, they've done rat cancer studies for many, many years, apparently, and rats never live longer than 27 days when they're infused with cancer cells. They die by 27 days. On the 17th, let me see, make sure I've got it. Yeah, on the 17th day, the rats that were the control group, receiving the healing energy, started forming ulcers and scabs on the outside of their skin. Those not receiving the healing energy did not, but they were getting weaker. So no rat has ever survived beyond 27 days. On the 28th day, the rats that had the abscesses on their skin, the abscesses on the 28th day, when all the other rats had now died, those who were receiving the healing energy, the healing thought, the healing emotion, the abscesses fell off. And on the 35th day, those rats that were receiving positive thought and positive emotion, on the 35th day were cancer-free. It's an extraordinary study. That piece of work is in the book Mind to Matter by Dawson Church. And the other thing that I want to share with you is probably a story that many of you know. It's from the Hawaiian practice of Ho'oponopono. It's a healing practice that was created by a spiritual teacher, Morona Siminoa, a Hawaiian spiritual teacher, and then was used by her student, Dr. Hugh Len. And Dr. Hugh Len worked in a forensic psychiatric facility. And he went into this forensic psychiatric facility where they couldn't keep a psychiatrist or psychologist on staff because of the violence in the psychiatric facility. The men were very violent and people would come and go and it was chaotic and there was turnover. Dr. Hugh Len went into this psychiatric facility and said, I will work here and I'll work with these patients, but I'm not going to see any of them. And what he did for about 6 weeks is he sat in his office with the case files of these men, one at a time, holding the case files in his hands, generating positive emotion and positive thought. I love you. I'm sorry. Please forgive me. Thank you. Over and over and over again. And within 4 to 6 weeks' time, the violence on the unit all but extinguished. He did not change medication. He did not start groups. He did not do individual therapy. He simply used self-directed neuroplasticity, using his thoughts in a particular way, and self-generated positive emotion. These are the ways that science now tells us that you can change your consciousness and change your inner world. It was believed, even in our lifetimes, that if you're depressed, you're just going to be sad. You're just going to be lethargic. You're not going to have happiness. We now know that that is not true. Even in the midst of depression, while you may need to use medications to get yourself to this point, even in the midst of depression, you can learn to generate positive emotion using any form of meditation, mindfulness, TM, heart coherence meditation, critical to being able to change your brain structure. And then also a very, very simple practice that is scientifically proven to change your inner world, to elevate your emotions. Self-generated positive emotion is simply a gratitude list. Many of you have probably been practitioners of that. I'm going to check the chat and then move on. Fifth sentence. Oh, I bless you. Oh, that's nice, Teresa. You add a fifth sentence. I find it very powerful. Everything that I want to change in my life. Of course, not only it's awesome. Energy comes from a place where there is no time and space, Phyllis. Excellent. Amazing. Wow, wow, wow. I'm not sure what you're all saying wow to. I missed that. The whole prison was closed after a year of him practicing that. Yeah, I love that. Thank you, Patricia, for adding that. Morna Siminoa, thank you for adding her name. Excellent. Reiki for rats. Yeah, that's awesome. How do we get into the quantum realm? Cheryl, that is a really, we all have healthy egos. I love that, in the place of being in the world, being able to walk through the world and be of service and help alleviate suffering. So the question, Cheryl, that I want to go to, how do you get into the quantum realm? This is what I'm talking about. This slide right here, understanding what I just said, that you can use your mind to train your brain by talking back to your thoughts and recognizing that your thoughts are not true. They're just your thoughts. They really don't mean anything. They're patterns of neurons firing. So first of all, elevating your inner world of thought through some of these practices that I've just talked about, meditation and gratitude practices, creating self-generated positive emotion. One of the other, so gratitude practice is one simple way. Another way of self-generated positive emotion based on research is being of service, doing volunteer work. Even the simple act of making eye contact and smiling. That's why I asked you guys to turn your camera on. When I have a neurological connection with you, when I see you, that elevates my emotion as opposed to just talking to myself. When my emotion is elevated, I will think more clearly. Therefore, I will deliver a better class for you. So there's a reason behind that. Self-generated positive emotion is doing things that generate positive feeling. Making eye contact and smiling elevates your mood through the use of something called mirror neurons. And the opposite is also true. There's in the book, How God Changes Your Brain by Mark Waldman. I'm going to forget the other author's name. Andrew something and Mark Waldman, How God Changes Your Brain. In that book, they talk about the opposite is also true, that the mirror neurons making eye contact and smiling elevates your mood. When you're angry and you express anger outward, not only does it hurt the person that you're expressing anger to, but it hurts you neurologically as well. And there's some really good research around that. So that's the answer. How do you get into this quantum realm? Meditation, gratitude lists, talking back, recognizing that your thoughts are not true. And then this this last thing that I will talk about, the most important way that you can bring yourself into the quantum realm is being an active creator of your life and living your life in alignment. I created a course many years ago called the Life Design Course, that the whole goal of that course is to elevate consciousness by bringing into alignment your values, your purpose, your mission, your vision, and your goals. So who you are, what your purpose is, what you value, what you're doing, where you're going in life, how you're going to get there. When all of that is aligned and you can answer those questions at a deep level for yourself, what's my purpose? What do I value? Who am I? And what am I doing with my life? When you bring that all into alignment, it changes how you see yourself. It changes how you see the world. In January, I'm going to be launching the Life Design course. toward the end of January. And any of you who've liked what I've said tonight and are really interested in raising consciousness, being in the quantum realm, I hope that you will join me for that course that starts in January. But the last piece of it, and I know there's a lot to this, it's one slide that has, literally a lifetime of things to say about it. But I want to at least give you this notion that for you to look, how aligned is how you're spending your time with what you value. I do that question in my Calming the Chaos work as well. So let me see what time it is. Awesome. Oh gosh, shoot. It's 8:30. That's all right. All right. So I want you to go back, look at your intention that you wrote for at the beginning of our time together tonight. And was your intention fulfilled? Awesome. And just go ahead and review that for yourself. If you want to drop that in the chat. Yes, it was awesome. Yes. Thank you. Awesome. Glad to see that. All right. And then the last thing that I want to say is thank you all for being here. Thank you for your energy, your attention. I love what we covered tonight. It was just an extraordinary class. And in my gratitude for you, I have a gift that I would like to share with you. Anyone who would like to meet with me to talk about what we've covered tonight, and in particular to explore whether or not being in the life design course is right for you at this time in your life, I'd like to give you the opportunity for a free consultation with me, a one-on-one call, a private call with me. And all you need to do to secure that, to schedule that with me, is send me an email. There's my email address that I just sent out to everyone. And I'd love to have each and every one of you join me in January for the Life Design course. It is a 4-month program where we will do exactly what I said in that alignment slide. You will end up that course knowing what your purpose is, although you learned that tonight. So your purpose, your values, your mission, your vision, and your goals, and as well as a deep in-depth study of the levels of consciousness, and understanding that if you change your external conditions, but do not change your inner world of consciousness, that nothing really changes. Awesome. Thank you, Teresa. So anyone who wants a free consultation with me to talk about the Life Design course or ask me questions about tonight, you can feel free to go ahead and do that. Teresa, this is an awesome webinar. Love your teachings and energy. Thank you. Attention to all the comments. Well, I think it's important that I connect with people. So I am going to wrap up here for tonight, but because I would love to be able to take questions, I will formally close our session, because I said it would be a 90-minute session, but anyone that wants to stay on and ask questions, feel free to do that. But I will close for tonight. Thank all of you for your time, and any of you who want to stay on and ask me questions, I will hang out for about 10 or 15 more minutes and feel free to chat with you. Okay, thanks everybody. And anybody wants to ask me questions, go ahead and do that. You can just take yourselves off mute.